Hi, we're Oxygen Conservation, and this is the Shoot Room Sessions. Joss, welcome to the Shoot Room.
Hello, look at this. Amazing, isn't it?
It's not a bad place to be, is it? Can you tell people out there who you are and what you do?
Yeah, well, I'm Joss. And who am I? That's it. That's a philosophical question, isn't it? I'm a husband, I'm a brother, I'm a nature lover, and I'm a brand guy. And I'm very fortunate enough to be the founder and CEO of Enviral, which is a communications agency that helps organisations tell their sustainability messages. So that's me.
Lots of stuff to dive into. Can you give us your career contents page? And even start before that, take us from where you grew up, what childhood was like, through to how you're running the company you are today.
Okay, cool. I was really fortunate enough to grow up in Herefordshire, the green and pleasant lands, the rich, fertile soil which is in every Herefordian's blood. And I grew up in paddocks, running around, in green fields, which was I just couldn't have asked for a better upbringing.
And were you conscious of that at the time? Did you feel like this is special, or was it just what it was?
You know what? Well, it depends what time. So I guess some really interesting times. I remember being 7 or 8 or 9 years old and getting really into army. And my dad bought me from a second-hand army store this spade, which is about this big, had a little saw on it here. It's folded, folds up, and his way of making the most out of the summer holidays was saying, you're really into army, why don't you dig a trench at the end of the garden? And I literally spent 6 weeks just digging. He still says it was the best investment he's ever made, this little second-hand army shovel. And then about a year later, again, a really, really big moment in my life.
Wait, what did he want the trench for?
Well, he just thought, army, trenches, World War II, World War I.
I expected you to say he wanted to run some cabling through it or something. There was a practical reason.
You're into army.
Yeah, okay, just dig a trench.
Just dig a trench, and that can be.
And did they let you back in the house during this period, or did you have to live in the trench?
Me out at 8 a.m. and then we'd just be like, right, it's lunchtime at about midday, and then go back out again.
We're recording this in the school summer holidays, and so for those parents out there like me and my lovely wife who are suffering with our kids, make them dig trenches. It's clearly the way forward.
Go to the army surplus store and buy yourself a spade. But then within that time, skateboarding got really popular again, because it was in kind of a bit of a downfall, and got really into skateboarding, and that was a genuinely monumental time in my life, looking back at it, especially because I then actually started resenting being in the countryside. I was like, why am I not, in the middle of a city? Why am I not able to go and skate some concrete? It was that balance. Looking back at it's really interesting because initially, green fields, soil, nature, inspiration, imagination. And then this thing came about around creativity, brand, influence, all around progression. Pushing yourself at this against the grain, creative, almost punk, subculture of skateboarding, mixed with nature. And then you kind of fast forward to about when I was 16, where I found out about renewable energy.
What were when you were in the skateboarding phase, what were some of the brands that caught you and that you loved to start with?
Look, I mean, the poster child of skateboarding is Tony Hawk, right? And the way that he also was able to reignite a whole subculture into a mainstream media through things like PlayStation, films and music videos. It's fascinating. To see that trend in kind of the late 90s, early noughties. I think that there are a series of different brands that have completely shaped my perspective of brands that center around community, brands that center around creativity, and brands that are willing to think against the grain. they are the success metrics of a lot of organizations now. But yeah, I had that kind of nature time. I had this kind of subculture skateboarding time. And then when I was 16, I found out about renewable energy. But renewable energy didn't have, the Elon Musk figure or the Tony Hawk figure at the time. It was just like pretty uncool. And I remember like actively being like, this is really interesting. There's like technology here, which is all around progression. It's all around a solution of, dirty energy and global warming. At the time. It wasn't climate change or the climate emergency, but global warming. And this is a really tangible and really obvious, logical thing that we should be doing, but it didn't have a brand. And so I remember like actively feeling that I'm not gonna be interested in this thing, even though I'm genuinely interested in it, because it's going to ruin my street cred.
And you were conscious of that at the time?
100%.
That's amazing.
And I just thought that was a really interesting thing. I think that if you look at people like Elon, love or hate the guy, at least he made things like electric vehicles interesting. There's a brand, there's personality there. And he's done a lot in that space to ignite something, which to me is just like bleedingly obvious that we should be.
I don't think you can create an inspirational, interesting thing without dividing opinion on it.
Yeah,
because otherwise it's vanilla ice cream. Yeah. No one walks in and is offered vanilla ice cream and throws the bowl on the floor and is offended by it. But equally, very, very few people are incredibly excited about vanilla ice cream. Personally, I like a Nutella ice cream, right? I'm going to be really excited about that. Some people are going to hate it. And that's been something for me in business that I found really difficult, because I don't want to upset anyone. I don't want to piss anybody off. However, I'm now open to the fact that the faster we want to go, the more we want to do to try and help people and the planet, that is going to divide opinion. And if we're trying to put something out there that gathers attention, that makes people notice and change behaviours, it's going to upset a chunk of people.
Yeah, totally.
Otherwise, it's not going to be effective in the slightest.
I think that's what I learned in the early days of those kind of counterculture skate brands, music artists that effectively were causing controversy, doing things against the grain, but standing out and creating communities. And those communities then, gathering momentum and these moments in time have like shaped whole generations now, which is really interesting.
Yeah, it is.
And I think, there's one teacher that I have in mind who spotted this journey. I think it's a kind of fast forward. We've got a young person out in fields. We've got kind of starting to be a teenager, getting into skateboarding and music, and then 16-year-old doing GCSEs, finding out about renewable energy and the possibilities there, and then a 17-year-old being a bit lost, and a teacher saying, right, where are we going? You're either going to be this kind of long-haired, guitar playing.
Did you have the long hair?
Yeah, I was always trying to push it as long as I could go. But then you've also got these like very interesting beliefs around nature. And then, fundamentally, both my parents are business owners, they're traders. They work relentlessly. And entrepreneurialism has always been part of the journey. And so with these three kind of areas, he was like, where are you going? In fact, come over to my classroom. We're going to have a chat. And I just remember it so clearly now. It's amazing. And we found one of two courses in the country at the time that merged both environmental studies and business studies. And there was one up in Dundee, up in Scotland, which seemed quite far away. Although there was quite a cool indie band at the time from Dundee, so it was relatively appealing. And then there was the University of Leeds, and I knew that the music scene in Leeds was really good.
What do you think that teacher saw in you to put in the effort to have that conversation? Because there's tons of kids, right? And I presume he didn't have them with every kid. What was it he saw or connected with you that made him put in the time and effort?
Yeah, he was a people person, right? And, going macro and looking at leadership now, the fact that he was curious, interested, and just there to be like a teacher from the true heart of what teaching is. He was also my design and technology teacher, so he was a creative person himself and quite a logical person himself. Mr. Cutts, what a legend.
Does he know the impact he had on you?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Yes and no. I think there's been 3 teachers who have got kind of significant moments in time for me. But I should definitely tell them more.
It's one of 2 persistent features in the shoot room. So people often talk about an early experience in the environment, 5 to 10 type thing, which is usually a parent, a grandparent, a family member that's connected with the environment. And then without fail, there's one teacher or lecturer who's spotted something. Yeah. And it consistently, irregardless of sector or what the person's doing, there's usually...
That's a really interesting point,
it is, yeah.
Did you have one?
No. You mentioned about the countercultural bit. So I'm so envious of people who had entrepreneurial parents, and my family's pretty crap. Don't speak to them now. And it was always, don't put yourself forward, don't try and do anything, keep quiet, get a trade, don't do anything. What they did teach was a really hard work ethic, but the concept of being in business by yourself, being able to talk about money, being able to talk about politics, no, we don't do that. Yeah. So I had such a blinkered, like, don't have ideas above your station upbringing. The one bit that did it for me was my dad took me kayaking as a teenager, which connected me with the environment and rivers. So I suppose that's my thing of gateway into the environment was loving rivers and understanding the world that way, which led to geography, which led to data and PhD and all that stuff. So that was that part of it. And I guess that maybe I did have, there was one geography teacher who was really cool, a guy called Robert Downs. And yes, the joke Bob Down is a thing, it's his name. So he was pretty good when I was at school, but I went to a really crap school. One of my favourite stories recently, I was having name drop moment, lunch with Ben Goldsmith, and he said, "Oh, are you going to buy land from whereabouts you went to school?" And I was like, "No, Ben, it's terrible." And he's like, "But I had a lovely time at school." I'm like, "I know, you went to Eton."
Wow.
I didn't go to Eton. It's very different. They taught us to steal cars at my school. It's not the same. So I didn't think about it before, but I guess I did. So kayaking with my dad, and then this geography teacher that was engaging and interesting, but it was very much the rivers and the excitement. And my countercultural bit was the kayaking world.
Yeah, for sure.
So the first brand I adored were animal watches.
Yeah,
which were
I had one. I remember it. Yeah.
So when I was still talking to my parents, I bought my dad every old. So he's got cases of Series 1 animal watches that I would track on eBay and just anywhere around the country build up this sort of watch collection, which I was kind of hoping to get one day, but I'm not getting that now.
I remember animals so much, and
were they prominent in skateboarding as well as water sports?
I think it was wider than that. It was standing up for extreme sports in general. But it was they were kind of like the gateway brand to some of those like really core niche brands. And I remember, the kind of going on the internet, having that dial-up signal, because I've also really, really fortunate enough to be brought up in a time where I was completely offline and then completely online.
When was the internet accessible to you? When did it kick in?
About 11, 12, 13. I remember my dad having this gateway computer, big thing, and the dial-up signal, and basically just going online to search Birdhouse skateboards, which was Tony Hawk's skateboard brand, Toy Machine and chocolate skateboards, all of these like really sub brands, and just looking at them constantly, and looking at the art, looking at how they structured their kind of products.
Oakley's was big for me as well.
Yeah, Oakley was huge. Yeah, and they were really formative brands for me, and I learned a huge amount from just osmosis, just being there.
It's something you mentioned earlier that. So I'm a bit older than you, but those people who were living those skateboarding, water sports, whatever version of fringe sport was going on at the time, and now the people that are running businesses with those same ethoses and ideals. And you kindly gifted me a Von Chenard book as you arrived today, but that was his journey too, right? Yeah. Rock climbing, whitewater kayaking, straight through to those values that created a community there that he wanted to replicate that community in business.
But they're mission-driven organizations, and they're mission-driven organizations based off being outside or in the outdoors. And I think that's just really, really critical to, I guess, the initial setup of these organisations. They often kind of spur from the founders' beliefs, and then they get shaped and moulded as those organisations grow. But those core fundamental practices. I was just on a call with Patagonia this week, and very high up people in the company. One of them is like in a shack halfway up a mountain. The other one is at home, but their kid is also on the call. They live and breathe this stuff, but they live and breathe this stuff because Yvon Chouinard lived and breathed it and wanted to set up the organisation that way. And I found that really interesting. And as I kind of said, we founded this course at the University of Leeds, Environment and Business.
What year did you start that?
I'm really bad with dates and numbers, but it was 13 years ago when I started. So this would have been 14, 15 years ago when I found the course. And I didn't actually get the grades to get in. And that was an interesting one. But things happen for a reason. And whilst I didn't get the grades to go in, I went to a science festival in Cheltenham Science Festival. I think we got tickets from the school, and I was just like, I'm just going. And I remember going, like, I'm pretty sure on my own, to go and see Jonathan Porritt and Tony Jupiter speak. And I'm just like out my depth, right? Just soaking this thing up, but it just felt like the right thing to go and attend. I think Tony had just released a book called 99 Ways to Change a Light Bulb. And it effectively just being this kind of intro journey into people living more sustainable lives. And I was there, didn't really have a clue what they were talking about, but I just realized that, okay, these people are on to something, even though they'd been on to something for like 20, 30 years at that time. And I didn't get into the University of Leeds, but I remember calling them up. Especially when a few of my friends had gone travelling. So I was still in the UK. I was working in an outdoors mountaineering shop in Bristol, where I'm now living, and set up the business. And calling them saying, look, I don't need you, you need me. I've been actually messaging Jonathan Porritt to see if I can shadow him. Like, I'm really invested in this. Jonathan was like, my dear boy, you would be bored shadowing me. You'd come into my office, you'd watch me write, get to lunchtime, you'd watch me eat a sandwich, and then you'd watch me write again in the afternoon. You'd sit in the corner, you wouldn't get much from it. But if I can ever help you, let me know. And that was a really foundational conversation I remember having with him. But that little moment where I literally was trying to shadow this person who was, a bit of a godfather in the sustainability space, that, I think, kind of the other end of the phone was like, oh, right, this person is actually genuinely interested in this. And they made an exception, allowed me in. I worked really fucking hard at university.
Where did the confidence come from to make the call?
It's totally my parents. They're traders.
So you just taught to ask the question.
Yeah, I remember my mum doing something really, again, foundational, looking at when I was about 8, 9 years old. We used to go to the little corner shop in Ledbury in Herefordshire, and she would buy things with me. We'd go around, buy our kind of like our grocery shopping, and she'd buy things that we didn't need. And we'd get to the car, and she'd be like, "Oh, we've already got tins of beans. We don't need these. Can you go and take them back for me?" So she'd park the car always on double yellow lines, and we'd walk up this little pathway. I mean, it is in a town, so it's probably different to what you would do now. But I'd walk up just really nervous, and I'd be like, "I'm really sorry, my mum has actually asked if I can take these back because we don't need them." And she would call it confidence building. And that was like her training that she used to do.
So she'd made the conscious choice.
100%.
That is amazing.
100%. Yeah. She would do that. And she'd do it in loads of different forms.
Your mum's going to need to apologise to my kids because I'm going to...
I'm going to steal that now. Yeah,
I've never heard that. That's amazing.
Another thing that I've heard recently, and I think it was Simon Reeves Simon Reeves' grandparents used to do it. which I think is a really interesting way of that I've stole with my nephew now, is you get in a car, you get the nephew in the front seat, and you get to the end of a lane and you say, do you want to go left or do you want to go right? You start that progression of adventure and them kind of knowing that they can actually kind of go on their own path.
Yeah.
So you just go for like 30-minute drives and you get them to direct where you want to go.
It's so interesting. So another thing that I've learned throughout having the privilege of having pretty much 80 conversations with amazing people now is you are either consciously teaching your kid things or you're unconsciously doing it.
Yeah.
What are you role modeling? What are you showing? So you've already said your parents worked relentlessly,
Totally.
and then they were unconsciously teaching you that because you were observing it anyway, right? That's who they were and what they were doing. And then they were consciously teaching you this needing to ask for things, the confidence there to pull stuff out. So I'm now really aware, what am I unconsciously teaching stuff and what are the choices to make? And it's such a balance because you alluded to it with the fact that, do you let your kid walk up a little side street in a town now? Maybe not. But equally, I had a pretty crappy childhood and that put a chip on my shoulder and a work ethic that was there. Me and my wife constantly having these conversations about, you want to make it easier for your kids than you had it, but you make it too easy, all of a sudden it goes. Like every summer holidays, school and university, I was labouring on building sites, working in horrific jobs that I don't want my kids to have.
Yeah.
But if I hadn't have done those, you don't have the skill set that you're collecting all the way through. So it's so difficult how to know to do the right thing.
And I was always put to work at some level, right? And actually, there's good and bad things, the kind of the unintentional learnings and the intentional learnings, because they worked relentlessly. That kind of that hustle element of literally working from 7 a.m. in the morning and still talking about work and answering phone calls and doing those things.
Did you resent that at the time?
I think it has quite a big effect on you, because effectively, like, I was an independent, youngest of the family, just like too busy, and my parents gave me so much, so like massively privileged for sure. But like where other people might go and do typical things that you do as a kid, I would literally go to houses. My mum was an interior designer and antiques dealer, and we'd go and like sell furniture at people's houses, which is great, but it was a slightly different thing. It was just through osmosis, you just do different things, different experiences. It was great. But it shaped that confidence was there. Character building is at the heart of her principles of parenting. Just work hard is at the principles of her parenting. But also, the reality is that we were probably trying to live a slightly higher level of life, always like trying to strive for something more and not being celebratory or even just kind of content with the fact that you work really hard, go and take a holiday. And that wasn't a thing, it's just work. To the degree that, it was, and work is bigger than just working for the sense of making money. We have always volunteered outside our local family butcher. I don't eat meat, which is a bit of a strange one, but we've always volunteered outside the family, the local butcher, the 3 days before Christmas. So when most families would go and do kind of Christmas, you've got like right up to Christmas Eve, just like serving the community for charity. And then it would be like, okay, in like 4 hours it's Christmas. Let's think about that. Let's go and put some decorations up,
Do you know what was the genesis of that? Where did that come from?
Again, my mum has just always been that type of person. Serve the community. And the fact is that it came from when winters were cold, there would be queues down the street of all ages, including old people, getting cold. And so it started with her making mulled wine to keep people warm, in literally down the street. And then like the little family butcher, which is literally half the size of this room, but it's like one of the best butchers in the UK. People were, I think she's always very proud about independent business, especially when the Tesco's of the world, which I remember landing in our local town when they came. It's just like, you've got to protect the local business, but you've also got to protect the local community. So mulled wine, mince pies, do it for charity. And that would just be the thing. We've been doing that for years and years and years and years. But it's definitely an interesting one. And those little moments are really interesting when you look back, but at the time you're just doing it, right? That confidence was definitely around character building. And as my mum always said it, if you don't ask, you don't get, always. And that's been a mantra constantly. And thinking back at it just right now, I use that a lot.
And it got you all the way to Leeds.
So there, I had like 3 little businesses or 2 little businesses at the university, and also worked for a big energy drink company known for giving people wings. Whilst I was at uni, that really taught me brand building.
That must have been awesome for social life.
Oh, dude, it was mad.
I always saw did you have one of the cars as well?
I had various different vehicles. So we had...
with the big Red Bull can on the back.
So drove that around. I actually had cooler vehicles.
Did you?
Than the Mini with the can. I had an electric milk float for 4 weeks of the year, which was amazing, with speakers that came out the side. we used to do something called a little PR stunt called the Red Bull Man. We'd send little letters through all of the student accommodation kind of houses saying, just leave this little, like this hotel, please do not disturb. It says, please do disturb, little Red Bull sign. And if you left it on your kind of doorknob, I would drive around, see it, and I'd leave like 4 cans of Red Bull in a traditional old milk glass milk carrier, which is interesting. That was cool. I had this big converted Land Rover with a hydraulic roof with some DJ decks that popped out the top. That was really cool, and it was literally the best. Like I would work at that organisation still if I hadn't woken up to the fact that selling caffeinated, sugary cans of drink just wasn't in my ethos.
It's an amazing, the whole concept around Red Bull's marketing is epically wonderful. We've got some wildlife joining us.
Yeah, we do.
Cans smaller than normal, vibrant colours, a drink that tastes by anyone's definition weird.
Yeah.
I quite like it, some people hate it, but it's very different in every which way. Such an aggressive countercultural marketing campaign so I first heard about it in Austria on a school trip in when I was 14 or 15 as being a thing, because it was first associated with snowboarding and things like that.
Yeah.
But no one ever had done advertising like that before.
Right.
And then push it through the student scene and everything they've been a masterclass in how to do things differently from a marketing perspective.
Privately run organisation with a founder with very strong principles and values, which were then kind of taken into the company. But those values around just boundary pushing and everything that you can do, they would do some mad things, and we could go into all of that. I annual marketing conferences jumped out of planes, and then they would stick you in a boardroom and say, right, last year we chucked somebody out of space, think of something bigger this year. It's literally what we do. And I was just in the first kind of opening, kind of companies of official work, and I was like, wow, this is crazy. Everything was around word of mouth though. So brand building, all around word of mouth. That word of mouth KPI, they had the risk factor of it's a really untangible thing that you can't prove constantly.
Did they try and measure it in any way?
Yes and no, but it worked. That's the thing. They measured the fact that it was just constantly working. They were growing their reputation, they were growing their sales, and it was around, a series of very, very talented people and some values and pushing the boundaries. So that was brilliant. And at the same time, I was learning, environmental business. Partly in the School of Earth and Environment, partly in a business school. And second year of university, after I started with Red Bull, I think I'd been with them literally 4 or 5 weeks. And the opening of when you start to work for them in student brand marketing, you literally go to what they call the flight school, and you have a 4-day kind of induction into marketing, which is really amazing. 4 or 5 weeks after that, came up with Enviral. Was in a lecture theatre. I'm a daydreamer, 15 minutes in, kind of, how do I find organisations that are doing the right thing? They've got these social environmental principles at heart. I know that they exist, but why can't I find them? Their environmental principles are really great. I just wish they would go viral. Oh, that's interesting. And then by the end of the lecture, I'd bought the web domain name, started sketching the logos. I just knew that was the thing. And And it was set out to do what we do now. You know, there are organizations that are so focused and delivering like just incredibly mad things for human civilization and our planet. You know, whether it's like a innovative textile company or, you know, rethinking how you know, finance and natural capital, you know, can lead society moving forward. We need people to be focusing on that, not necessarily being storytellers, not necessarily being, at the time, Facebook pixel marketing experts, or you know, delivering brand guidelines, you know, or how to shape a narrative and how to build a brand with credibility at heart. And those elements, you know, they all just clicked, and that's effectively what Enviral does today. So yeah, that's 13 years ago this October.
Wow.
And so yeah, that's us. And now, yeah, we're based in Bristol, you know, kind of growing in London as well.
Did you finish uni, or did you walk out the door and go, I'm starting this now?
Yeah, finished university, and actually then went and worked for another drinks company, which I thought was a bit more values driven, because the products that it was in the coconut water world, and this coconut boom that was happening at the time. Yeah, the product was grown on trees. That was really important to me, rather than a concoction of other caffeinated and sugary things. And I did learn, you know, and also I think after university I was like, I've got to go to London, and I moved to London, and just didn't click with London, and also didn't click necessarily with the brands there and their kind of the reason why they existed.
Do you like London now?
In small doses.
So Josh, who's always behind the camera, him and I was having this exact same conversation the other day, that I find it energizing to visit and leave again. If I'm there for an extended period, not for me.
So I set up Enviral. I tried to set up Enviral twice in London. You know, our registered office address is still London. I still go visit there 3-4 times a month. We have office space in London, but I consciously made the decision to move back to Bristol. As I briefly mentioned earlier, I had my first little job for 4 months in a ski and mountaineering shop in Bristol when I was 18. And I used to drive, an hour and 15 minutes from Herefordshire there, and then an hour and 15 minutes back, because I wanted to go and work in this thing that I was really passionate about. That's when I learned how to sell. That was a really interesting journey. But I knew that Bristol had something very creative. I knew that they were very values driven. There's a really big environmental scene there. So that was the natural move. We're still there. We kind of launched the business 7.5 years ago. It's kind of been in process for 12, which is cool. Amazing.
So give people an idea of number of people, scale, and the sort of things you work across at the moment.
Yeah. So look, my belief is very kind of intertwined into the fact that all organisations, charities, NGOs, for-profit businesses, they have a role in pushing the sustainability agenda forward. And actually, you know, brand and communications is at the heart of that, whether it's internal communications, external communications, how organizations want to show up in their marketplaces. I'm really, really proud to work with lots of different types of organizations. So, you know, we work with, you know, core sustainability climate organizations. They've always been kind of the bread and butter of Enviral. And, you know, more recently, there's kind of core charities. So, you know, we work in the kind of regeneration space. You know, we just launched a campaign with RSPB and the Pesticide Action Network as a collaboration. We work with Greenpeace, you know, work with WWT as charities. You know, we work with scale-ups like Ecology, climate organizations like Climate Partner, and European organizations like Climate Kick. But we also work with like multinational organizations. Hitachi is a great example of that. You know, big innovation brands that know that they have got such an important role in pushing this future sustainability-driven world forward. And also working in what we call credible brand-led business transformation. So being the kind of sustainability guardians with heritage organizations like the NatWest Group in how they transform as an organization. And so, yeah, we're really, really proud. And we do strategy, creative and advertisement. And yeah, always kind of been interested in kind of trying to see how we are able to use the agency business model and push it as hard as we can to kind of change the marketing communications industry for good.
For people outside of your world, what does the agency business model mean? How does it work?
Look, it means different things in different ways, because you'll have everything from a marketing agency to a recruitment agency, but it's effectively an organization, a business, a brand come to an agency looking to solve a challenge, a set of problems, and kind of going to core expertise that they wouldn't be able to necessarily afford to build in-house to answer a problem, whether it's recruitment or it's brand marketing or communications campaign. I think the agency world, for people who have worked with agencies, I think the word agency has got a pretty bad brand image often, and I think that those very close client relationships that you can give that are around value added, attention to detail, experience, are really, really important in any kind of client agency relationship. But also the fact that this sustainability journey that we are all on is still quite new and fresh. There isn't direct answers. Yes, there's doing things in the right way and there's doing things in the wrong way, but everything is constantly evolving all the time. Look at biodiversity net gain. It's a newish concept. Look at the Green Claims Code, which is effectively legal. Mandatory regulation to say what you can and you can't say to try and stop greenwashing. And the reality is that if you look at greenwashing, a lot of that is unintentional.
Yeah, do you know what? I completely agree.
Yeah.
And actually the other thing is people are so scared of saying things now that almost it's stopping some progress, because
Totally.
if a well-intentioned person has a minor slip, they're obliterated for making a mistake. So we need to give people the room to get things wrong. I'm not saying Shell or BP can come out and go, we're really great for the environment. But if a small business is trying to make progress, we've gone from A to B. I saw a coffee company the other day in fact, it was Origin Coffee, that made the call to go away from a sort of plant-based packaging back to a more recyclable one, because they've done the maths and they think it's the right way to go. Totally. Most people are like, yeah, really good decision. Some have been like, no, that's terrible. Come on, people are trying their best to make a step in the right direction. We should embrace the intent, not necessarily the specifics, I think.
But that green hushing problem, which is where people are either too scared to talk about it, or they are intentionally hiding in the shadows because they aren't having to talk about it.
Yeah.
That is really risky. And the other part to this, which I'm probably most worried about, I know you haven't asked me this question, but if I look at the world and sustainability in business specifically, and the progress that is needed in the next, let's be honest, 5.5 years for 2030 targets, but the fact that we're already at 1.5 pre-industrial levels, we've got 5.5 years as a number, but realistically we've got a few years to really get this sorted, and we need organisations of all sizes and scales to just be doing absolutely everything that they can be right now. And in doing things, it often leads to really great communications, internal, external, investor relationships, whatever it might be. It's all communications. And my worry is that the organisations that have been trying the hardest to date to get it right, when they don't get something done to the level of expectation of people in the industry or in sustainability, they just get called out.
Yeah.
And so, we've got a real problem at the moment with friendly fire. We've got a real problem of, plant-based eaters and regenerative agriculture over here, or, the regenerative space, kind of all friendly fire, going against each other, but we're all trying to strive for the same thing. We need to focus on outside this echo chamber, or the people who aren't doing something, who aren't engaged with it, and that's communications and brand.
We had so I experienced that lifetime. So there's an amazing guy called Richard Kelly who leads the Foresight Sustainable Forestry Fund. Yeah. So they're the first company to list a portfolio of carbon credits on the stock market. really transformative. But they are commercial foresters. They grow trees for timber, for building products and everything like that. And I got some stick for having him on the podcast. They're like, but they're foresters. I'm like, yep. They're brilliant at what they do. They're sequestering carbon. Do they have a very different model to us? Yes. But can I learn something from this brilliant person and showcase the bits they're contributing? Absolutely, I can. And a couple of people in the conservation world, well, hold on a minute. We shouldn't be showcasing commercial forestry. But it's not. Why is it absolute? Why can't we celebrate the element that they're doing that's moving things forward? Do I grow commercial timber? No, that's not our model. Do I want more timber to be used in building materials if we are to be more sustainable? Of course I do. There's room for everyone to do this. I am starting to see a little change in the environment sector. So we talked before we started recording. 5 years ago, you couldn't have a conversation about natural capital. The people in the financial world had no interest in the environment world whatsoever. And the environment sector was a very closed, you can't come in book. This is our very close-knit community. We'll do it ourselves, thank you. What I am seeing with the emergence of people who perhaps were in the financial world but have a background in environment or conservation or geology, they're coming in now with a genuine interest of having some positive impact. And I think it's making the environment sector more open to collaboration. So a really good example of that is Rob Gardner, who heads up Rebalance Earth. And he's come in from St James's Place and Reddington, big financial background. Him and I got together and said, look, we all have a commitment here to try and scale the whole environment and natural capital sector. None of us are competitors. Our competitor is time and the fact that we might not have a planet worth living on. So we're collaborators, not competitors. And I think that's changed dramatically, certainly in the last 5, if not last 3 years, that makes the environment space more collaborative, more willing for people to get involved and share things, which we just need to do because there's not enough time for anything but
100%. I couldn't agree with you more. And yeah, I definitely agree with that in a business sense. There's collaboration, not competition, is something that I'm so proud that, specifically in the kind of the communications
it's so important to that
is really, really, really important. But also if you look at we've done a number of projects in the last, since the beginning of Enviral, where we will partner up specialists with other organisations. And, whether that would be the NatWest Group over here, who've got 18 million customers, with, a small scale B Corp who can then actually funnel some real actionable change. That's a great collaboration there. Or it's, 2 or 3 charities that are really well known collaborating, but they've got their own kind of ways of doing things. It just leads to this movement being amplified and spread quicker. That said, it's the impact of communications when you go and do a campaign and you've got like keyboard warriors or specialists, often in like energy, or agriculture, who is so fixed on their belief that they actually make the brand collaborations up here not as meaningful.
So we've just seen that play out in the conservation space in the last couple of weeks or so. So Aberdeen, the investment fund, bought an estate called Farrellier in Scotland, 3,000 acres, former grouse moor, I think, but depleted landscape. They've planted millions of trees, improved the environment. They've held it for 3 or 4 years. They bought it as a sort of a laboratory for them to experiment on that land use change. They worked with the Natural History Museum to benchmark the environmental bits of it. Expert ecologists, they did exactly the right thing for the environment. They've now planted these trees, they've created carbon credits, they're bringing back to the market to sell that estate because it doesn't fit the rest of what they do. They own more built property, industrial space and things. But they wanted to move the market forward a little bit with this. And The Guardian wrote a ridiculous piece saying, this is terrible, they're making too much money too quick out of this. And they go to the same land use campaigner every time for a quote who doesn't believe in private land ownership and essentially accuse them of doing the right thing in the wrong way. Mm-hmm. And it was like, now, Aberdeen, a lot of the money they manage is from pension funds. Now, all pension funds are owned by the members and the pensioners. So if we're arguing, the Land Reform Group are, that they want land to be more democratised, what's more democratised than our pension funds owning land? We are all owning it. The idea that it's essentially a community buyout, but delivered in a really efficient way. So I wrote a counter piece back to this, and unfortunately it was received wonderfully by people. But we've got to not bash people for doing the right thing, maybe if it's not in the exact way we would want to see it done.
Totally. I can agree with you more. And yeah, it is especially The Guardian with, beyond value chain mitigation and the SBTIs, is a big kind of approach here where organisations like The Guardian have got so much influence.
Yeah.
And again, it's friendly fire. We've seen it with the BBC recently, which have been kind of calling out carbon credits, but targeting the good people, or bucketing the good people in with the bad people. And then it really being so damaging on their brand, and also just the momentum that people are literally working completely relentlessly to try and shift society in a good way. And in every business industry, there's good people and there's worse people,
Yes. I often get asked, are carbon credits good or bad? Yep. Yes, they are. There's a spectrum.
Yeah.
Can you buy terrible carbon credits? Yes. Can you buy good ones? We hope so, because we're going to sell those at some point. Can you buy a terrible car and a great car? Can you buy terrible food and lovely, sustainable, organic food? Of course you can.
Yeah.
We've put expectations on natural capital to be everything to everyone and perfect. So right now, we've got people arguing that a carbon credit, that, let's be clear what it is, it represents the equivalent sequestration of a ton of carbon, which has the ability to offset something you're doing elsewhere if you choose to use it in that way. But we also now want it to have biodiversity impacts. We want it to have some kind of social impact. We want it to create jobs. We want it to do all these things. No one's saying to Elon, this car you've made, Tesla, it's great. Could it also teach my kids? Could it also be a bug hotel at the same time? It's just, do I want carbon credits to offer all these things if they can? Absolutely, that's wonderful. But we need to have lots of carbon credits, and we need to be sequestering a lot of carbon. And if we keep trying to put in more and more features in different ways, we're going to end up with something that lacks the clarity and the ability to deliver a great quality product.
Yeah, and especially if we don't have rules for organisations to mitigate and do some genuine deep changes in their business models, then we also need this.
Yeah.
It's not one or the other.
No, we need both, full stop, and a load of other stuff.
And a load of other stuff. Yeah. And I think that silver bullet perspective that we're going to solve climate change, or we're going to have the answer and it's just going to come in and it's going to change things, that's a branding problem. That's come from sustainability, getting sourced in the 70s as this either very academic thing, or this tree-hugging hippie thing. And then you've kind of got skeptics and, high carbon who have just chucked an absolute grenade in there with the fact of, is this thing real or is it not? Or, it's your personal carbon footprint that you need to be focusing on, not your business. It's brand, it's storytelling. And, if I could do anything, if I could have the genie in the bottle, it would just be to go back to the kind of 70s and just think, right, let's have a really great brand strategy on this.
There's so many examples of that. So I try my damnedest not to talk about sustainability, and we sometimes slip into it. But I wrote a piece saying we left sustainability in the 80s. We had a shot then and we went, nope, no thanks, we don't want that. And we blew right past it. So with permed hair, shoulder pads and great music, we left a lot of it in the 80s. Quite like that line. So we try and talk about being regenerative now, because we've come so far. We need to be regenerative in terms of what we're doing, the way we use things, the way we approach agriculture, things like that. The biggest branding issue, two biggest, I think, the environment sector in general still has a massive brand problem. Yep. So if you said to your quote unquote average person, even the middle of the the one standard deviation of the bell curve for you data geeks out there, around the middle of the average person on the street, talked about the environment sector, they'd imagine a retiree on a Sunday or the hippie type approach. Whereas actually the environment sector to me now is far more looks and feels like that youth counterculture that was skateboarding and things like that. Yeah. And that generation's really coming. So I think there's a total branding and reputation problem with the environment sector that we're trying to be part of changing. And the other is carbon markets. So, and this was someone from the finance sector that said this one to me, calling them voluntary carbon markets cost that market 20 years. If it was called private carbon markets, all of a sudden it elevates, it professionalizes. The fact it's voluntary, well, you don't need to do it then. Whereas if it's private, there isn't the same thing there. So I think it shows how important that brand strategy and a word placing.
Singular word, 100%. And that's what we do day in, day out, effectively, is look at how we can try and challenge that, try and challenge the branding problem that, different kind of niches and narratives within this impact space, are going towards. But also, trying to work with clients to try and get them to be brave, unexpected, to think about not getting shackled by past communications, which may or may not have worked, and trying to kind of imagine what that future approach to communications could look like.
So you mentioned some awesome brands and businesses and causes you collaborate with. Can you take us through an example of someone, and this can be startup or big corporate, who you think does authentic communication well in this space?
Oh, okay. Interesting.
And it can be one of your clients or not, just a showcase of what you think good looks like.
Yeah. Look, I think as a brand guy, even just as a sustainability guy, it's very easy to just go to the organisations like the Patagonias and the Oatleys, the Tony's Chocolonelys, that are kind of the poster childs. But that actually isn't, I don't think that's beneficial often, because you can go onto their sites and you know that they're doing really good things, and there's heaps of B Corps that are kind of following the 3 C's that we always try and align to, which is making communications creative, consistent, and credible. And those 3 C's are something that can be interpreted in different ways to different industries. I'm fascinated by B2B. I think that's we've almost had our chance with B2C. Getting individuals to do things, especially in a cost of living crisis, especially when sustainability is often a premium. Like, there are organisations that are doing some brilliant things around how you make your personal choices count effectively.
Just on that premium point, once met with the team that were responsible for Marks and Spencer's environmental footprint and the way they embed it in their whole supply chain.
Yeah.
They took all references to organic and locally sourced off their sandwiches and produce. Following 2008 to 13, they didn't change the price point. They took the messaging off because it was perceived that they were premium, and made it more expensive. So that whole thing about that perception of premium, it's still there.
Very much so. Very much so. But the reality is that, look, like we've got some net positive impact that we need to make really, really quickly. And I believe B2B is the space to do that. And so I'm interested in how really credible B2B organizations, which aren't the classic branded organizations, how they exist. I think Rockwool is a really interesting, kind of building supply brand is really interesting. And why are they interesting? Well, they've got a lot of depth that you can find quite easily online. Really kind of in-depth sustainability hub that shows all of the impact that they're making, but in like a quite brand-led and communications like focused way. It makes it engaging, makes it interesting. It's not like, the classic world and hand kind of image that you tend to see in kind of corporate sustainability.
Child's drawing of a tree.
Yeah. It's the kind of, it's the four-way handshake, that you see of all these kind of B2B organizations. It's like, it's not that. It's done with the fact that no matter if you're B2B or you're B2C or you're B2B2C or you're B2G, we're talking to human beings, talking to people, and you've got to engage on them with that human level. I think they're really interesting. I think Velux windows as well are really interesting as well. Prioritizing creativity, but they're doing it with some depth.
And one of the only companies that's tried to at least get to lifetime net zero, which is a pretty aspirational. I mean, up there you've got Microsoft and Apple alongside them claiming that. I mean, stratospheric ambition. It's definitely really interesting, isn't it? And I just think that these levels of organisations, they're the ones that really count right now. And they're the ones that, actually communications is just totally vital for them to lead the movement forward. But what is, I guess, what's the like secret sauce that I'm seeing at the moment as what makes communications as impactful as possible? I think that vulnerability is the word. It's the realization that, and this has been done
time and time and time again, we're on a journey. We are going to be better. We know that we need to do more. That's a good gateway into organisations showing that they are responsible. And some of the best work that we've done, actually, again for the NatWest Group, getting a financial organisation which has got so many people in marketing and so many different stakeholders that they need to kind of literally make happy, and then be in line with like various financial guidelines. We literally got them to say that, like, our planet is telling us that we aren't doing enough. That was like a huge thing for a high street bank to do.
Yeah, massive.
That with Heritage has invested in high carbon, but they're going through a very credible transition plan. And yes, it needs to be sped up, but it needs to be sped up by everybody understanding what the future looks like, and that is communications led, brand led. And the organizations that are up for that vulnerability, I often find that they're the ones that make the most amount of impact in the shortest amount of time. And it's because you're not just like, internal communications is so important. Sustainability is so important to be a cultural DNA to an organization, like we just talked about with the Patagonias of the world. The reason why people go to them as the poster child, as the immediate reference, is because it's so like in depth with their DNA.
One of my sayings that is kind of like testing the business: how you do anything is how you do everything. So you can't Patagonia don't shortcut stuff. You as soon as you take we do this because it's cheaper, or actually it was Leon, the sort of deli brand in London.
Oh yeah.
They released a piece that as they scaled and took external capital, they ended up seeing a massive drop off in terms of their iconic chicken sandwich, and the guys who started the brand went back and tried this thing. And because of the cost-cutting people in the sort of business improvement, they'd taken lettuce out and replaced it with cabbage. They'd cut half the chicken. They were like, it's awful. There's no wonder no one's buying this. Yeah. Because it's you make one tiny decision, then another one, then another one. And the reverse the marginal ruining of something, the marginal losses just compound upon themselves. And the same is true about a business. If you're really about the environment, as soon as you shortcut yourself and don't do it, it doesn't mean we don't all have to make honest, like no one's got an unlimited budget outside of Google and Tesla maybe, but things have to be affordable. You have to be able to pay people and be a business that's still going and sustainable and profitable in that regard. But you can't sacrifice your culture or your authenticity and integrity of what you're doing, or you're just done at that
100%,
point.
100%. And I think that vulnerability message is so crucial to that, because as soon as a communications campaign goes out, or an internal communication strategy is created, then the rest of the organization starts to see, okay, it's fine to not be perfect, and it shows that actually we've got some really big things that we need to do, but we are here, and actually it needs everybody to get to here. And that roadmap is really interesting, and the kind of the transparency of that roadmap I think is really interesting, and that's what I think good B2B organizations are starting to do. And then on top of that, it's the actions, it's the initiatives, it's the fact that Lego, the C-suite are intertwined into their bonuses, into their performance reviews, is the reduction of carbon, and there is a level of want, and there's a level of need in making progress happen. And as soon as these initiatives are done, actually it leads to brand reputation. Like the amazing thing that we've got in our space is that organizations that genuinely do good things, backed up with genuinely good actions, have got brilliant stories to tell. They've got an absolute plethora of them. Like there's so many marketing agencies who work for maybe traditional businesses, around often consumption, who are just scrabbling around to try and find any type of story.
Completely.
And that's really scary. And we've got to realize that in the industry that I'm in, specifically in communications, which is directly correlated to consumption, if we do our job really well, it leads to more stuff being produced and sold, often in traditional marketing. That is broken. We're in an agency and communications industry issue that's really, really big.
Do you carry a sense of guilt about that?
I am trying to figure out ways where we can work with organizations that aren't totally orientated around consumption.
Yeah.
And orientated around different things, whether it is the connection to nature, it's the connection to community, it's working with, cause organizations that are standing up for bigger things that can shift people's behaviors rather than just make people buy things. In fact, like a lot of the B2C brands that we used to work with, we just don't work with anymore. And that's like intentionally and unintentionally. The space has changed for sure. Like I think the prioritization of sustainability at the moment, when there are cost of living crises, there's people who are becoming way more risk averse because they're wanting to keep their job. That is a problem, I think, in the momentum that sustainability communications got around the COP26 movements. The fact that we had a teenage Swedish child kickstart a sustainability revolution is because it was unexpected. It was bold. And that made something happen. And now everybody's just playing it completely safe. Let's look at last year. 8 out of 10 of the biggest selling movies were remakes. It's not unique. It's not original. It's not bold. It's not creative. And music that we're listening to is either edits of old songs or like literally like inspired so closely to like songs that have actually been commercialized that it just makes creativity and boldness become a bit stagnated.
How do you personally make sure you stay open to finding new creativity and new ideas in that world?
It's really hard because that's the world that we're in, right?
The music bit was the gateway to that question because I heard something the other day that said so I'm 41, right? By the time you're 40, you've listened to most of the new songs you'll ever listen to. And they reckon past 40, you actively stop seeking new songs.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, I do. I just listen to 50s, 60s, 80s stuff that I remember. So in your space especially, how do you keep open to that?
It's because it's really hard, and it's we can be always looking for new, but you're also at the mercy of clients and client expectations, and often like very solid tight briefs that we need to challenge.
And most of the decision makers will presumably be in that often older category, so then themselves are not necessarily looking for new. Oh wow, that is a poisonous problem.
As an agency, you're responsible for leading and answering challenges and pushing clients forward. And that's where like tighter relationships, which are long-term and regular, they really, really benefit because you can have that consistent engagement. If it's just like a flash in the pan campaign, it's like a fixed term contract for 6 months to do something, you can't ever get to that deep relationship.
The trust.
It's the trust. It's the like, hey, we've seen this. We think this could be like huge in your space. Let's take influence from it, but let's take these core foundations of what you're trying to do in your business strategy and your communication strategy, and let's push it forward. You can't really have that in fixed term contracts in short campaign moments in time. But with the economy as it is, that is the trend of businesses at the moment, is the retainer model, often because agencies just haven't nurtured them well enough. That is becoming less prevalent. And I think that communications and campaigns are being hampered by that. But how do we stay like on trend and ahead of the trend and ahead of the curve? One, it's by hiring brilliant people. I'm astounded by especially our creatives, how they think. It's just amazing. But there's originality, and there is ideas that often get shaped by other ideas. We have a inspo chat in our Slack group, which is just every single day is just filled with like different things that people are seeing. And that is, reading magazines, it's listening to music on Spotify, it's being prevalent on LinkedIn and seeing stuff that other people are sharing. But the more you, especially online, the more you engage with a certain narrative, actually the more streamlined your algorithm gets to show the same stuff more and more and more and more. So you need to actively try and get out of that. We have things called Please Look Up sessions every quarter in Enviral, where every department has a half day to look up from your computer screen and just go out. And normally it's in Bristol. We'll go and, I don't know, the last one that the creatives went on was a lighting exhibition the other side of town. They had to walk to it, look at all of the amazing graffiti and architecture that Bristol has, and then go to this lighting exhibition. And like just a color palette that you might see on some graffiti or on a light might inspire a client color palette in a branding evolution. You need to look up sometimes. You need to get out of the kind of the echo chamber or the algorithm, but it takes time, and it takes conscious effort to do that, which is interesting.
It does. So as well as inspiration, where does your rest, recovery, rejuvenation come from? Where do you find that? And you personally, not the team.
Yeah, it's nature. Look, the outdoors is the place that I've been very fortunate enough to enjoy since I was very young. But in running a business, again, you really have to try quite hard to get away from Zoom and your laptop. And even when I do have time out in nature, I literally find myself like reaching for my pocket to go and just like look at my email, or like when I go for a weekend out in nature, I will literally like hide apps from my home screens, The thing that I'm doing, I have to kind of gamify myself a little bit. I'm wild camping every single month this year. I've got a really big passion for going out and getting a canvas and sleeping under the stars and hiking and pushing myself in different outdoors locations. I will be doing that tonight. And I learn a huge amount from blue sky thinking, which is literal. I learn a lot from the fact that you have got resources that you depend on to survive. And whether it is your water or your food or how long you need to walk to get back to where your car was parked, all of those decisions you just don't have in normal everyday life. You can just go to a shop and you buy your lunch, or you get stuck in a routine that actually, I think getting out in nature, you can just try and get out of that routine. You break that cycle. You have a little bit of a fire break to actually kind of realize what you are as a human being on the planet that you're in, and then that actually that gives you that self-realization of why you're doing what you're doing, and that's a big thing for me. So yes, it's rest, but it's also supercharging my business. And it's really hard when you're a small business working really hard on making it as impactful as it can be and making the client campaigns that we work on as impactful as it can be, just to get that time to do it, So actively Bristol, being close to, the southwest and the Brecon Beacons.
Bristol's such an exciting city as well. Like, I think it's kind of like the big brother or big sister to Exeter. I think it's like it grows up as you get further up. But the both cities have a very similar feel to me in terms of creative and excitement, just a bit more when you get to Bristol, I think.
Yeah, we've done a lot of work for the Met Office down in Exeter, and I totally get that. It's really interesting where you've got certain organisations who are just like at the heart of the city, which you just don't really get in like a London or a Birmingham. But if you look at like Aardman Animations in Bristol, it's like it's so focused into then how that city is perceived. And the same with Exeter, with it being kind of like weather, nature, data. It's really interesting how an organisation can have so much impact on a local community. I guess the interesting bit to that though, is how do I rest and recharge? Because music is also a big thing. I do a lot of DJing, so that forces me to go and listen to new music, which is brilliant. And I'll always be having my headphones in my ears. But you don't need to go to the Brecon Beacons to get that nature injection. And maybe is it outdoors? I think that outdoors nature, again, the power of a word is super important, right? Just going and spending some time in a park, it can be 15 minutes, but it just changes your whole day. I am a big believer of the power of the outdoors, inspiring creativity especially. But I'm also I've just seen it time and time again for me as dyslexic ADHD thinker, having time to try and solve those challenges, those boulders that are strategic. Having that blue sky thinking, that you're not just closed off, even in a room, it really does help unblock those things. I think as a solo founder, and it can be a lonely place, right? And so you're often in a place where you're like, oh, I've got to do all of these things, and it just whizzes around like a tumble dryer in your brain. But having that kind of, I'm on a path for like 10 miles. If I go right, I fall off a cliff and I'm dead. If I go left, I'm going to go off course, and it's just going to make my route to the destination that I'm going to even longer. And I've only got enough water to get to that place. You've got like constraints, but you've got this blue sky thinking that actually can be really, really powerful in just like thinking, coming up with solutions, visioning, all of those things, which are, crucial to our roles, right?
Love it. Joss, it's been an absolute pleasure having you in the shoot room. Thank you so much for coming in. This has to be part 1 because we've got so much more to do.
We've got loads to do. Well, you're going to have to come to my podcast.
I would love to.
And we'll do part 2 there.
Awesome. Thank you, mate. Have a great day, guys.